First of all, I'm very grateful to be here, and second of all, I'm really glad I don't have to stand behind the podium because you really couldn't see me. So what we're going to do is just try to give you a little flavor of what we're up to. Libraries have been in the center of technological revolutions. We haven't necessarily been driving them, but we've been deeply affected by them and usually are responding to them. So from the time that computers began to be used in government, they were driving huge changes in the library behind the scenes. And that has been going on for 20 or 30 years. This continues on with ebooks, it continues on with downloadables, and it will continue to affect us in ways that most of the public will never see. One of the big changes is that public libraries less and less own their materials and are leasing them, which has huge implications for who owns the intellectual content of our country and in what way it can be preserved, in what way it can be changed without our permission and knowledge, and in what way it can simply disappear. So we stand as still the institution that provides, with tax dollars, free information to individuals in any way that they like, in as much material as we can get without regard to income. We are changing the way we're delivering service in some ways that we don't like, and in some ways that we do like. For those of you who have been paying attention to what's happening to us in the last 2 years, you may know that we've slashed the library hours at the main library. And we've also closed 2 libraries. So that's what we don't like. We are expanding other programs, usually through grants. We have something called a Story Lab, which we will introduce you to. We've greatly expanded our services to teens and to children. We have been in a mode of remodeling some of the facilities that we've had, usually using trust funds, which are beginning to run out, and sort of manipulating our budget to try to fix buildings. So we'll cover a little bit of that. The latest thing I just want to tell you, does anyone here live on the east side? No? Have you seen the Mate Library, if you have, Jim? We've just remodeled Mate. It looks like a completely different library inside. I think you'll really like it. We have more computers in that small library than any other library in the entire system other than the main library. We've been able to really squeeze that in because that's one of the big demands for library services is access to the internet. And every year we find ourselves doubling our bandwidth to provide the kind of access that people want. When the tsunami hit Japan, our whole system seized up, and we had to start blocking access to some of the major websites because there was so much traffic going to those websites, and they were streaming pictures from Japan that our system couldn't handle it, and we just had to start closing down access so that we just didn't crash. So that's kind of the modern library as it stands now, but we'll give you a little bit more of some detail, and we'll just start off now. David, could you get... We're hoping that this works the way it did in front of the City Council, but you never know. Okay, so what's changed with this? This is a study session. We report out to the City Council what the changes are in the library system. And some of it has to do with new services, and some of it has to do with making your budget. So, as you may or may not know, the City Council asked us to provide some Sunday hours, and but they didn't give us any money to do that. So we have created a kind of mini version of that. What we do is we mirror the school district, and we provide service during the time the schools are open at the main library. And one of the ways we paid for it is by migrating off the city's telephone system into voice over IP, which has been quite an adventure to try to make it work smoothly because it's a very different way of creating our telephone system. But for those of you who have called us lately, our telephone system has changed entirely, and be patient with us. We're still finding things that are a little ragged, but that's why we did that. More importantly, this year we're bringing up something called a new ILS. Now, libraries love acronyms. It makes it sound so important, but I'll just translate that. An ILS is an integrated library system that runs, it's a computer system, software, that runs our entire library system. It keeps the patron records, it coordinates it with all of the materials records, check out the whole thing. We are very antiquated. We were holding off doing that, but right now we're working on configuring a new system, and we're going to be bringing it up, we hope, in October. And you'll see a lot of change in our services and these, especially the search engine, which right now I don't think is very good. If you're looking for a book, it can be very hard to find, and this will be a great improvement. So the other thing that we're working on is increased ability for us to download materials. You can get ebooks. You can even download music. It's called Freegal. But we're enhancing that. We've gotten some grants to train our staff. What's happening now is people are bringing in their latest gift, a Nook or an iPad or a Kindle or whatever the latest platform is for delivering e-material. And we're explaining to people how to use their gift. And we're explaining to them when things don't go the way they should go, or there's some little glitch. So we're working on training all of our staff. Many of our staff don't have these materials, so we're learning as we go and trying to solve people's problems on that. We have a lot of use of social network. How many of you have ever visited our Facebook? Anybody? We have a lot going on our Facebook. We Twitter. So there's a lot of information. We have our own YouTube channel through the Story Lab. So we use social networking a lot to give you updates, to tell you about programs. I would mention email, but who likes to get stuff on email? We do send you email if you give us your correct email address. But for most of us, I'm not sure we consider email social networking. But nonetheless, we will send you reminders of a book that's overdue, et cetera. So, the Story Lab. The Story Lab is a Paul Allen grant. The Paul Allen Family Foundation is very difficult to get grants from, but we applied for a grant for what we call Story Lab, which we'll explain. And we got the biggest grant that they had given out in that cycle. So it's a whole nother way of us delivering education to our teens, and we hope to expand it to our entire community. So in some respects, it's a lab. But the idea is to marry the skills that are new, very high-end technical software, especially for communication, and to enhance the ability for people to use traditional skill sets, that is research, being able to put a storyline together, finding themes, developing characters, et cetera, both in text and picture and audio. So the notion is to develop all of those communication skills to a much higher level. We're pushing these teams to do that. We do it through a lab that is open in the afternoon. There is a teacher there who comes from a private school for a couple of hours a day. And we have our own teen librarians that we have been able to assemble in the last few years. And they literally work with these teams. Sometimes we're able to have these kinds of programs on the weekend. We bring in programs that adults are lining up for, but we are limiting these programs to teens because that's what the grant is for. And then, as I mentioned, when we gave this presentation to the City Council, we talked about the renovation of the Mate Library. The Mate Library is somewhat unknown. It's up on McKinley Hill. It's a beautiful little library, but it was very dated. And so we were able to do a complete renovation from a new roof, new major mechanicals, to a complete tear down of what the inside looks like. It's very beautiful right now and highly functional, and well-deserved for that community. So, a little more detail. Sunday hours are at the main library because so many times it's difficult for people to come down to the main library during the weekday. But the main library has our richest level of resources and most of our internet attached computers. So we wanted to make that available. Tacoma has never had Sunday hours in their library system. This is the very first time. The difficulty, of course, is we're not open every Sunday, so you have to be pretty sharp to keep your eye on when we're open and when we're not. When we are open, you can see that the computers are filled. From the moment we open the doors to the moment we close them, the computers are in use. Obviously, people are going to programs. We are surprised at the turnout that we have for programs. And then people are checking out materials all day long. So we have, that's an example of one of our programs. You can see that it's a big auditorium for those of you who are familiar with the Olympic Room at the main library that was completely filled. But we are also doing arts and crafts, story hours, and so forth for children and teens. So I mentioned the voice over IP, and I mentioned our motivation for using it. It was to provide the money for the Sunday hours. But it is supposed to also bring us more flexibility in our telephone configuration. As I said, it has been challenging and remains still a little bit challenging. This particular slide is up there because we were letting our city council know that you keep asking us to do more with less, and this is kind of the way we're doing it. So, okay, the ILS is called, the new one is called Innovative Interfaces, Inc. We spent several years looking at the options, and we were considering something called an open source ILS, which King County decided to go to. But for a number of reasons, we thought it wasn't a good idea for us. So we went with the standard vendor, and our biggest concern was to provide the best search engine that we could with as many services as we could for the best price that we could. And we think that we've got that. And as I mentioned, we believe that we will be rolling that out in October, and you should see if you go online and use it, the catalog, or whether you use it in the library, you should see a big improvement. We were specifically looking for an ILS that could deliver multilingual services. And that gives you an idea of the kind of things that you'll be able to do online, including text messaging, something that we've been wanting to do for a long time. So the downloadables, well, this is no surprise. How many of you have ebook platforms that you use? A lot of you do, and it will grow. The problem for us is that our materials budget has actually shrunk in the last 20 years. It's smaller than it was 20 years ago. And we keep adding format after format. So we are very well aware that the e-content is as great and growing. Every time we add any amount of titles to our catalog for ebooks, the circulation just explodes. So, but we still have people, most of the people, who still use traditional books. They still borrow DVDs, and to some degree they still use CDs. Now, of all the formats that has moved to the digital format, it is music. If you notice, music has been digital for a long time, and it's harder and harder to get CDs. People just don't sell them as much. A lot of the stores that used to sell CDs are closed, and so more and more it's digital. In the library world, it's extremely difficult for us to get digital downloadable music. And part of it is that great fear of the violation of copyright. And the music industry has been hit very hard with people who simply copy the CDs. In fact, we know and cannot seem to stop the ability for people who come into the library and simply rip the CDs off in terms of downloading them to their own private iPod and never paying for it. And so the music industry, along with the software industry, has driven a lot of copyright law that is increasingly restrictive, and now is beginning to bleed over into restrictions for text-based material. Again, for the same reason. The great fear for people who make a living developing intellectual content is that they will simply have their material stolen, and they will see no financial benefit for their creations. And so the response is to try to put very high walls around their intellectual content. And that's one of the challenges in dealing with the ebook. So we know that people want more of this. The publishers are making it difficult for libraries to download them. And the other complication for us is the growing variety of platforms. So we have a shrinking materials budget. We have publishers who are not so sure they want to cooperate with libraries anymore. We have international copyright law that is getting more complicated, and so forth and so on. But we're still delivering ebooks, and we expect to continue to do that. So it's a balancing act for us. We would like to buy more, but we still are obligated to serve our public in the format that most of our public wants to be served in. So the ebooks will continue to go out, just not as fast as we would like to be able to provide them. So this is the social network. This gives you an example of what we use. And probably Facebook is one of our most popular ways of communicating with our public. We have a lot of photographs. We have a lot of comments. And it just tells you what's going on. We have a blog where we blog about books. And a lot of information, embedded videos, and so forth and so on. So the Story Lab, that's probably our biggest innovation. How many of you have seen the Story Lab at the main library? Okay, so 2 people will admit that. We have created a whole area of the first floor for teens. And we pretty much bar adults from entering that area. The Story Lab is soundproofed. It's filled, it's a Paul Allen grant, but it's filled with Apple equipment, which I think is kind of funny. It is very sophisticated for creation of music, video, any kind of audio, text, art. And they're just layers of ability in there. And the idea is to bring the kids in, ask them what they're interested in, try to do an assessment about what they know about software and or any kind of creation that they want to make, from music to art to writing. And then start them on a path of bringing up their skill sets in using the software and bringing up their ability to actually do the creation that has been the type of work that artists have done for forever. So we're trying to marry those 2 things here. And you can see what the room looks like. It's soundproof because so much of what is being done is music, and because the kids are just very noisy. So that gray material is soundproofing. So just to give you a little flavor, we've been featured a couple times on New Day I think it's a King television. I'm never home during that time, so I have to take a big word for it. But we have some embedded video just to give you an idea of what that looks like. This is a young man who you will be seeing, who is a really talented composer. But he also couch surfs. He lives from house to house. Like so many of the teens that we serve downtown, they're very, very fragile. Their lives are very, very difficult in many cases. In other cases, we have kids coming from advantaged homes. But I would say the vast majority of the kids who are at the main library are in very difficult circumstances.
It's not like
it doesn't like it?
It doesn't like it. We looked it up.
Okay, well then
if our PC crew is still here,
well, we can just move on. It is actually on our website and our Facebook, and this is a young man who does rap music, and but he's very talented. So we brought him up, and they played music, and it was just so very well received, and it got a lot of YouTube hits. The thing to know about this, though, is that we work with teachers, and essentially a lot of kids started showing up once this appeared on television, and they started doing their music, and we bring in teachers. But we push these kids and we say, you know what? Your themes are sounding all alike. You know what? You need to grow. And for those kids
who are interested in growing, they start asking questions, they start moving on with the themes and the music and develop their skill sets. And that is a tremendous accomplishment for them, and it's frankly why we did this. So we do want to be able to move this kind of learning on. This is a photograph, photography. This is just one example. We will bring in professional photographers. Sometimes they volunteer, sometimes we pay them a stipend. And they will show, they will go through, say, an afternoon, a morning of explaining what makes a good photograph. They will have the kids go out and take photographs using a theme. And then those photographs will be critiqued and explain what was done right, what was done wrong. And then they'll go back out and take photographs. And you will see tremendous improvement. That's just kind of one skill set. So this is an example of photographs that were done in downtown Tacoma only. And this was done, I think, was this October?
In
September, October. So these kids take their cameras and go out, and we've had little galleries, and it's just amazing the kind of improvement that we see. It's just really, frankly, wonderful. They were obviously over at Wright Park. So
We will be exhibiting these photographs at the Mandolin Gallery this spring.
So it's this kind of work. We've had a teacher of voiceovers. So there's a whole day-long program. A professional came down from Seattle and explained to the kids and showed them and had them practice voiceovers. And not only did they talk about the techniques, they said, here's what the business is about. So they got some career development, and not only that, but this professional said, and you can set up your own studio at home for not that much money. Now some kids might be able to take advantage of them and some might not. But they were given some career advice if they had a talent for voiceovers. Now why did we do voiceovers? Because so many of the kids were doing audio and they didn't know how to use the mic. So that was one of the things we wanted to do, is to improve their ability at that level of skill set, which was just perhaps one component of the projects that they're working on. The last set of programs David worked on with, do you want to talk about?
We have 2 different programs, actually we have 3 different programs in the works going on right now. We are doing a 4-week hip-hop session with QDOT, Quincy Henry, who's a recording artist out of Federal Way, and he's working with our hip-hop kids to develop their skills. This is going to result in a concert with QDOT and some of the students he's working with later this spring. The other workshop that we have coming up is on video blogging with The Real Girls. The Real Girls is a Seattle organization that was created to empower young women to become involved in the video business. The video blogging ties to helping girls find a sense of identity, find presence, and develop good video skills, video editing skills. And it really kicks off this Sunday with a movie called Misrepresentation, a documentary about how the media distorts the images of women and doesn't present them in a very powerful way. That was my question.
We will put in commercials every place we can. So the significance of the Story Lab is really the future of libraries in some respects. I think where we're going is certainly more downloadable, certainly a lot of services that are delivered directly from home, particularly if you have powerful internet access. And Tacoma is very blessed with the infrastructure of Click. That isn't true of all communities, but Tacoma has a tremendously powerful infrastructure. It is, however, costly for a lot of folks. And so the library is that intermediary for the time being, but a lot of people are simply not coming to the library to get their library services. They're coming, they may never darken their doors except to get their library card, and everything else is done remotely. And I think to some degree that is likely to increase in the number of populations, especially with our seniors. As people want to get materials where they can change the size of the font, even change the type of font to make it easier to read, that is going to be a very powerful service for those of us who are getting older, that would be me, and want to be able to read comfortably. You don't have to rely on the large type printers any longer. You can read anything. And I suspect that as the text-based audio will improve, that is, you can bring up text-based and then you'll get an audio that's automated so that you can, in a sense, hear it as you choose your audio, your text. It isn't very good right now, but it's getting better, and I think that there's a lot of money behind making that better. So I see library services being delivered to the home more than it has been, but for a lot of people, they're still going to want to come to the library. But I also believe that those services will be more intense, more customized, and a lot of the services will be more educational. And that's why we have been exploring the Story Lab for those people who want and need those specialized services. So I think, I don't want to go through the whole study session. I think that some of it was for the good of the city council, and Jim knows what that's like. So this is just an overview of where we are right now and where libraries are. It's an interesting place to be. For those of you who may know librarians, a lot of librarians really like order. They don't like chaos. And most of us, if you like order and you don't like chaos, it's like the wrong profession, because behind the scenes it's completely chaotic and ever-changing, but always challenging and interesting. And we're sort of on that edge of helping people try to stay up with changing technology. And we have a lot of classes. We still have people who are learning how to use the mouse and email. There are people who really need that fundamental help. And we have constant classes on that. And then we have the kinds of classes that David has discussed a little bit. We know that adults have said often they want those classes that we are giving to teens. It's just a matter of how are we going to make that happen. But we are aware of that. We've had men come and look at the teen area and say, where do we get ours? Where's our place? And it's a matter, again, of space. But we're sort of aware of that demand. So that's where we are. Those are the changes. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.